everybody. A special thanks to Dr. Shetty and Dr. Mahapatra for this invitation, and proud to be part of the World Congress. So today my talk is encompassing all the wonderful speakers today, and in 12 minutes I will try to fly through some of the important things to be done when we look for an imaging modality. Our imaging center at Hyderabad. Heart failure, as you know, is a complex physiological state. The etiology is also complex, but four key things in the management are to be addressed. One is the ejection fraction, ischemic versus non-ischemic, scar versus no scar, and obviously the etiology. The etiology of heart failure encompasses a whole range of subspecialties, and they are extremely complex, and that is why it is important to move into the sphere of multimodality imaging, going through different subspecialties to address the common question of the patient. Now, in this whole plethora of options, as you see above, what is fundamental is to answer the clinical question that is posed by the physician. Second is the local expertise, which is paramount, the local availability of the technique or tool, the acceptance by the end user, who is the physician again, and last but not least, and let it not be the first, is the cost. And I also call it not the cost, but the cost effectiveness. Now, the American College has given a class 2B level of evidence C to use non-invasive imaging in heart failure, and it is given a level 2A level of evidence B for using non-invasive imaging in heart failure with underlying coronary artery disease. In our practice, you can see that the nuclear imaging and the echo finds a substantial part in the imaging in heart failure, but it is truly the MR imaging which really takes the cake, and it encompasses a wide range of areas like coronary disease, valvular heart disease, cardiomyopathy, and congenital heart disease. Now, if you look at the spectrum of imaging tools, you will see that echo performs extremely well in addressing the morphology and function. Nuclear images are excellent in metabolism and perfusion. CT, again, as we've heard from our speakers, is excellent in morphology, moving towards function, but it really falls short. But there is one technique that encompasses the entire spectrum of cardiovascular facet, and that is the cardiac MR. Excellent in morphology, good in function, good tissue characterization, unmatched, and a very close second in metabolism after the SPECT and PET scans. We are moving towards a one-stop shop for imaging. We are not yet there, where a precise definition of ventricular sizes and function, identification of etiology of heart failure, viability determination, perfusion assessment, dysynchrony, and pericardial disease should be addressed. Echo is the first-line tool in heart failure as it's accessible. It's a bedside tool, cheap, sensitive, with poor specificity, poor reproducibility, and a big problem in the wall thickness is less than 5 mm. SPECT, we've already heard, the accessibility is a little limited. It requires a specialized setup. It requires a radioactive tracer. It is relatively expensive with a good sensitivity, but a poor specificity. The reproducibility is good, but it involves radiation. Again, falls short when the thickness is less than 5 millimeters. The PET is an extremely limited accessibility with possibly less than 20 centers specialized doing cardiac work, extremely specialized setup, very expensive with a very good sensitivity, good specificity, excellent reproducibility. It involves radiation. Again, less than 4 mm is an issue and obviously plays a very good role as a third empire. MR, again, has a relatively limited accessibility, but 200 centers here in the country doing cardiac work. Specialized setup, it's expensive, no stress required, good sensitivity, good specificity, excellent reproducibility with no radiation, and great to use when the wall thickness is less than 4 mm, and a very good role as a third empire. So the imaging role in heart failure, again, is purely based on ejection fraction. Echo is the first-line tool here, followed by MR, which is the gold standard in terms of ejection fraction, left ventricular mass, end diastolic and systolic volume, and cardiac output. And it gets a class A in the utilization appropriateness in the American College, with PET and echo coming as close seconds. The other facet of heart failure is to know whether the patient has coronary artery disease or not, and that is important with Felker's paper in 2002, where the ischemic subset had a poorer prognosis. Conventionally, we have been doing it with the coronary angiograms, and you can see the picture on the left has a significant LAD lesion here, and on the right is normal. But we can do with echocardiography, especially the dobutamine stress echo, and the normal wall motion, especially at peak stress, really rules out significant coronary artery disease. But what about MRI? And you can see that even without application of stress, the typical scar pattern of a subendocardial or transmural completely differentiates it from the non-ischemic group, which is generally mid-myocardium. In CAD, the role is very important. As you can see, there is an 80% reduction in mortality in viable tissue if you can revascularize compared to those with medical management. So it's very important for us, despite the last couple of small trials which have not shown importance. Three great techniques, or four great techniques rather, to look at it. While wall thickness is by echo and contractile function, metabolism by PET, and cellular integrity by the nuclear techniques, and perfusion also by both. But it's CMR which really looks at all the 5 facets of viability in a very appropriate manner. And when you have a dysfunction, then the presence or absence of viability not only gives you viability, but also gives you the degree of viability. Dobutamine echo, again, is a first-line tool, easily available, and the typical biphasic response to dobutamine classifies those patients who are viable. In SPECT imaging, you can clearly see that the presence of a defect in stress and a partial thing in rest clearly shows not only ischemia, but also shows you viability in a specific lesion. When you have a more than 50% perfusion, it's viable. Less than 30, it is non-viable. But this is the gray area, 31 to 50, where sometimes can be challenging. And that is where we move to PET to look at the actual flow reserve. The MEBI scan also has a very good prognostic in that if the quantifying feature of more than 10% of the LV myocardium and the EF of less than 40 has a poor prognosis. PET really shines, especially if it is added to a CT, and we know the high-end PETs have it. So we can look at ischemia, we can look at viability, and it is extremely sensitive and specific. And unlike the nuclear scan, it has a wide region of FTG uptake to really look at viability versus non-viability, and it's a most sensitive technique in this regard. MR, as you can see, can not only look at the wall motion, it can look at the thinness of the myocardium, and more importantly, the tissue characterization is excellent with gadolinium. And here you can see a transmural scarred myocardium in the LAD territory, which is non-viable. What is even more important is that as the transmural extent increases, so does the likelihood of improvement of wall motion comes down. And this graded improvement clearly shows us that viability is not dichotomous, but extends over a region. And this is the data set that you get of wall motion, gadolinium enhancement, and finally the viability. What is more important, that although MR is extremely sensitive, you can see here that this patient has a lack of perfusion in infralateral wall, but there is FTG uptake here, but still the recovery is less than 13% because the wall thickness was less. But in this patient who again has no perfusion in the anterior septum and there is FTG uptake, the wall 8% recovery is more than 85% simply because on MR, the wall thickness is more than 4.5 millimeters, suggesting that both contractile function, wall thickness, and perfusion play a part. So if you're looking at viability, you can clearly see that PET is the most sensitive, and then dobutamine stress echo is the most specific. But if you have MR and you add the gadolinium and the dobutamine, you will find that MR has got the best specificity as well as it has got the best sensitivity. So in all these pillars, you can see that the contractile tools of dobutamine and MR have got the best specificity, while the nuclear scans have the best sensitivity. In valvular heart disease, echo and MRI rule. In fact, the American Society of Echo recently has actually incorporated the SECT or the SEMR guidelines and added MR as a very important tool, both for aortic valve disease. Here you can see in patients with heavily calcified valves and difficult to interpret gradients, the presence of MRI is very easy to quantify. In moderate multivalvular regurgitations of both mitral and aortic, the presence of MRI can really give you very accurate regurgitant volumes and, more important, regurgitant fractions. In eccentric jets on the echo, again, where Doppler placement is challenging, you can see that the MRI adds on value, especially in the intermediate lesions, and by the simple calculation can give you a very, very accurate value. Pericardial disease, again, echo is the first line tool, and this is the image you would get both on MR and CT with a characteristic septum here, septal bounds. But what MR adds in addition on the gadolinium is the enhancement here, which is suggesting that actually the pericardium not only is contributing to constriction, but actually it is also causing inflammation, which can easily be ameliorated by steroids. Non-ischemic cardiomyopathy, I believe, is clearly the purview of echo as an initial tool to separate the three dilated, hypertrophic, and restrictive. But once the morphology is made out, it is only MR which can actually sift through. And why it is important is that the etiology differs from idiopathic, which has got the best, to hemocrosis, which has got the worst pattern. If you look at the pattern on MRI, the ischemic pattern, the dilated pattern, the hypertrophic pattern of scar, and the myocarditis thing and the amyloid, you can clearly see that the presence of gadolinium distribution without stress can easily sift through the various kinds of cardiomyopathies. Gadolinium also helps us in prognosis by those patients who have got gadolinium enhancement have a worse hospitalization, sudden cardiac death, and mortality. The variable histology of the etiology of heart failure tells us to move into what is called T1 mapping, and Sanjay clearly showed us beautiful examples of the presence of the T1 mapping, how it differs from one end, the amyloidosis, and the other end, iron. You can clearly see there's a host of myocardial diseases that can be differentiated if it is done well. And it can be applied in multiple diseases as is shown. Now, one disease which is very important is sarcoid, where there's regional wall motion, there is gadolinium enhancement. But what is more importantly, when you do the PET, you get the avid FDG uptake in variable areas, suggesting there is inflammation with scar going on, and is a perfect case wherein you could see that both structure, function, and metabolism is extremely important in the diagnosis and also in the prognosis of these patients. And this is something that we have shown in our paper, where the addition of PET and MR really helps in the prognostication of patients with sarcoidosis. Iron overload on the echo looks very similar to hypertrophy, but it is only in the MR which clearly shows that not only in this patient which has a similar hypertrophy, there is only liver involvement, whereas the other patient who has a poor prognosis, there's only cardiac involvement. And this differentiation can only be done on MR. But what we are going towards in the next couple of years is what we call hybrid imaging. And you're going to find MR images and MIBI images, and then we'll have the MR PET images, which will show both the scar on gadolinium as well as the presence of viability with PET, clearly showing that we are moving into the realm of multimodality imaging. So ladies and gentlemen, the evaluation and management of patients who have heart failure remains clinically challenging, but essential to the appropriate care of these patients is accurate evaluation of cardiac morphology, accurate function, identification of the pathologic and modifiable substrate, and the use of multimodality imaging across traditional specialties is the key to success and good patients' outcome. At the end, I would like to leave you with this. As images, it's very important to image the right patient, to have the right data, to do the right test, see the right picture, and have the right read, and most importantly, have the right communication to the referral physician in order for imaging to really work in heart failure. Thank you very much for your patient listening.